So, defining my limit is something I constantly question. What does my limit feel like and how high does it reach? Because every time I take on something that I think will finally draw the line, I exultantly break through it. Each line I draw for myself becomes evanescent as soon as I seize the next opportunity to challenge it. And I found that the most extraordinary times in my life have come as a result of me pushing and pushing the limits of my capabilities. Without this mentality, I don't think I would be who I am. FFI has helped foster my drive to test my limits, and I think my fellow participants can agree that this organization has helped us all foster that drive. And I think I've always had this spark in me, but there was a time when I lost it. Elementary school Georgia, if you can imagine, was wild and creative and really unlike any other kid I've ever met. She was a natural born leader and comedian, and she had a crazy imagination. All of that barely scratches the surface of this interesting character. From being a little chef in the kitchen to accidentally forming a cult in her fifth grade class, she could have had her own movie. She always had loads of friends and followers, but there were people that couldn't handle her sparkle. When she was younger, it didn't bother her because her limits were infinite. The people who tried to taint her light didn't matter to her. And then there was middle school. And come sixth grade, it was the start of a new life in Chicago. New school, new friends, and although this wasn't her first rodeo, she had moved 3 times prior, it was different. People, instead of finding her spark alluring and hilarious, found it annoying and immature. She was told to shut up, stop talking, and you're not even funny. Seventh grade was even worse. Living now in South Carolina, which is where I still currently live, she decided to change. She shut it up, stopped talking, and stopped being funny. It was really hard. It was like trying to keep a bottle cap on a soda bottle that just kept getting shaken up over and over again. But it worked for a time. She made lots of friends and became really popular. She even sometimes loosened the cap on her bottle to her friends, and they enjoyed that sparkle. But still, a lot of people didn't. And for some reason, that mattered. And looking back, it was probably just because people were immature and intimidated by a funny girl. But at the time, she felt like she needed that validation. And people were so mean. So then she just kept tightening and tightening that cap. She began to think that in order to fit in, she had to draw the line for her limits low. The sky was not the limit anymore. She felt like she wasn't smart enough, funny enough, pretty enough to have infinite limits. She would not be successful. And she felt that way because she was trying to be someone else. That bottled up, depressing version of Georgia was not the Georgia who even could have reached that high. She wanted to be someone else so bad. It was painful to feel like she was never enough, that something was wrong with her, so she had to lock herself in a cage. Through 8th and ninth grade, the start of high school, that version of Georgia couldn't have been worse. And then lockdown happened, and pretty much everything changed. I wouldn't be here speaking to all of you today if lockdown hadn't happened. My parents took COVID and still take COVID because, there's still a pandemic more seriously than anyone I know. My parents made me change schools because the school that I was currently at didn't really have a good virtual option. So I switched schools entirely. They wouldn't let me see any of the old people in my life, my old friends, and they wouldn't let me leave the house. And I'm not even exaggerating. I was not allowed to leave the house. All summer, my old friends were hanging out with each other, partying it up, but acting like there wasn't a pandemic. That's the South for you. But I went to CVS, I think, once, and that was the highlight of my life at the time. And no one else took the precautions as serious as my family. And at the time, I thought it was the worst thing in the world. But I do think it saved me. And I sometimes feel guilty that that period of time that fundamentally changed me for the better was a period of time when millions of people lost their lives to the pandemic. But without the pressure of trying to fit in, I began a journey to rediscover who I was. I relit that spark and ripped off the cap that was keeping my true self hidden. I discovered that I am still an excellent artist, an amazing cook. I could read for hours. I love to work out and weightlift, and I love to spend time with my family and so much more. I took incredibly hard classes this year, and I rediscovered how smart I am. I had suppressed that aspect of myself for so long to try to be cool, but I exceeded what I thought was academically possible of myself. The limits have been broken, and I love discovering who I am. I don't have all the answers, but that is why I take every opportunity to dive deeper, like FFI. Everything in this past year that I have dabbled my foot in thinking it would be my breaking point wasn't. I surprise myself day after day of what is possible. The imaginary drawn line of my limit continues to be redrawn as I continue to break through it. I am proud of who I am becoming. From the once happy turned sad little girl, I believe I am strong, funny, talented, and an interesting person. So it makes me wonder when I will reach my limit, or rather, if I ever even will. And maybe I will never define my limit, but perhaps the endeavor, there is a thrilling beauty.